Hello, everyone. I hope that all of you can hear me very well. I know I've been having some microphone difficulties here and there, but my name's Edgar. I am the product manager for LANSA, and today I'm going to be really diving more deeply into what it means to have a user experience. How do we define that? What are the questions that we're trying to ask? And one of the reasons that this particular area is very important to me is because as a product manager, I've been with LANSA for a year now, and so throughout that time has been looking at what can we provide to our application developers um, to enhance their experience of using the Visual LANSA IDE. Um, so I felt that it would be really great to have this type of presentation where, I'll touch on some parts of progressive web applications, but most of this will be focused on user experience and designing for the user experience. But first things first, before I move forward, is that when it comes to progressive web apps, and I feel that a lot of people don't necessarily know this, is that, we look at these as guidelines to how an application should be designed, how end users should interact with those applications. But many of the technologies that are being used, they've been available for quite some time on the web. However, they've never been put together in such a way that you can begin to deliver web applications that are installable. And so when you begin to be able to deliver a web application that can be installed on a mobile device that may have a screen size of 5.4, 5.8 inches to a tablet that has a screen size of 8 to 12 inches, and then to a laptop, and then to a desktop, which that could be a monitor like the one I have right now, which is 27 inches. You have to start thinking in terms of how those various screen sizes scale and how do your components scale with the screen. Um, but outside of that, we have to also focus on, if we're building, our progressive web app or web application, what have you, and we know that we're going to have desktop users, we know that we're going to have mobile phone users and tablet users. What is the experience that those end users need to have? How do we make it easy for them to switch between their phone to their tablet to their desktop or laptop? So we're just going to talk about and touch on a couple points like that. I know this workshop is a little bit short, so I kept this a very brief because I would love to, like, if we have time at the end and there are any questions, to, have a Q&A session. So we'll just get started. So the first thing that, we definitely have to think about is, what is user experience? How do we actually define that? Hell, where do we start? And is it even important? In my experience, I found that many people forget about the user experience because a lot of the times we end up we end up conflating a UI or user interface as the experience. And that's not actually what the user experience really is. The user experience is, how your user is going to get from point A to point B. What elements does your user need to, transact with in order for something to happen within their application? And so the next slide, we're just going to, kind of define, like, what is the user experience, especially what is the user experience as it relates to progressive web apps. So yeah, so what is the user experience? So a user experience, it does not apply only to application development. So our everyday lives are full of experiences that are both good and bad. What if you have a coffee mug that has an inverted handle? Well, that's not the best experience to be able to drink your coffee from. It's going to feel very odd. It's going to feel very backwards. What if your fork didn't necessarily have a slight groove on the backside or a slight curve that helps it to comfortably fit in your hand? Those are small experiences that we have. And so anything that deviates from that norm actually creates a strain, and it can cause some type of cognitive overload. So if you're looking at this slide right now, I did this on purpose actually. So I may have just ruined your experience of this presentation for a slight moment or for the duration, who knows? But why? So because I caused unnecessary eye strain. And I did this by coloring two letters as green, uh, and those two letters are nowhere close to one another. In typical design practices, if the user, the capital U is green, then for the experience, the E right there, that may be green as well. Or you change it and you have the E as a lowercase letter and the X is going to be capitalized. But I added an additional thing in there where I darkened the E in experience to a darker shade of black that does not coincide with the rest of the coloring within the typeface. And so causing these types of unnecessary strain, like this could have been a very easy mistake. Colors that we see blend together very, very well. But at the same time, as myself, as an end user, that's a strain, and it disrupts the way that I'm actually reading the material. And so we can see this sometimes on the web. Most people have begun to really up the amount that of work that they put into making things more accessible and making things more readable. But yeah, just that one thing can really deter someone's experience. So, outside of that, when we look at the user experience, we ask questions about the actions our users expect to take and how they get from point A to point B. And sometimes it's not always about what the user expects, but the route you need to suddenly push the user to taking. So when we begin to define user experience, we're looking at, we want this to be reliable, it needs to be actionable, responsive, and subtle. Back in the day when we had GeoCities websites and people were able to throw on falling leaves and snowflakes across the screen while also trying to display important content, yeah, that was not the best user experience. And thank goodness we've come much further in that. But it's things like that. If I'm looking at a screen and I have falling leaves or snowflakes, while I'm also trying to navigate information that may be necessary for me right now, as an application developer, I've put a barrier there. I have blocked the experience of this. And more than likely, these falling leaves, they're on a timer. And so as they're falling, there may be certain parts of the UI that are being blocked that I don't have access to. And that just immediately ruins the experience. I'm going to go back to Google and find something else to navigate to. So within the understanding of a user experience, one of the things that we have to do is we have to be able to understand what our types of users are. And so there are many types of users, and they all need some type of definition. However, when defining your users, you want to stay away from adding unnecessary bloat, such as the HR user is 27, male with red hair that goes skiing on the weekends. That's superfluous information. That tells you, that doesn't really tell you much about what is the job that this end user is attempting to complete. So when you look at it from the perspective of, what are the jobs to be done? What does my user need to do in this moment? Then you begin to break down and define, who your user is and what your user is all about. So the first thing you would want to do is you would want to break down your users into their various roles and parts. So for all intents and purposes, as a lot of our application developers that are a part of the LANSA community, you know, we have a lot of organizations that are building internal tools. So one level of your user is going to be the internal user. And the internal user has, you know, various different needs that are different from your external user. So, okay, now we see that, you know, one of our user types is internal, but that can be broken down even further. So even though I have an internal user, I also have different types of internal users. You know, in this diagram, we've broken down the internal user as, you know, a set of accountants, a group of accountants, and perhaps our human resources department. And so when we're looking at defining what happens next, you know, we want to say, okay, so what are the jobs that each of these users, you know, have to accomplish? What are their day-to-day tasks? And in those situations, you know, you would work with your business analysts, or you would go to, you know, different people within HR and different accountants, and you would really interview them and get an understanding of what their daily flow is actually like. And so, you know, your accountant, you know, for the internal application that you use, they may need more access to visual dashboards and being able to manipulate graphs. They may need more ability to perform statistical operations and so forth. Whereas your HR department, they may need to be able to, you know, add in, you know, attachments, more note-taking abilities. They more than likely will need to have some type of recruiting component within their application. And so you have these two, and those, for all intents and purposes, they could be completely separate applications. But, you know, what if they were, you know, just one and the same? How do you make that user experience work across these different functions? And so those are some of the questions that you're going to ask. And so moving along from that, outside of your internal user, you'll have your external user. And your external users, they will always be broken down. And one of the best ways to break them down is by the jobs that they need to be completed. So, you know, on the second level, you're going to say, all right, I have a manufacturing partner or I have a subcontractor. These are two of my main external users. And then from there, you're going to break it down just like the internal as to what are the jobs that they need to complete. You know, my subcontractor may need to be able to submit billing or bid on contracts and potentially communicate with a manufacturing partner about X, Y, and Z piece of equipment. Whereas the manufacturing partner, their job that they're mostly going to be doing is they are going to be taking requests for the various equipment orders from my company. So those two, they have very different needs. And so when you're defining those users, you're defining what the job is that they need to get done. And once you start doing that, then you begin to get a better understanding of the user flow. And the user flow will fall in line with how you actually design your application and what underlying functionality that will have. So, you know, and one of the things that I'm going to focus on a little bit more in this area is the internal user. Because the internal user is very unique because they've more than likely used or are using a system that you have in place right now. And it's the system that you are attempting to replace or that you are attempting to modernize. And so the internal user is typically going to have a little bit more pushback when it comes to changes. So when we look at the internal user, they are really a special end user, and they are comfortable with the current flow of information and interactivity. A lot of the times, primarily because they have been using this application the way that it is for a very long period of time. And so when you have done that, you understand your shortcuts, you understand how to complete things very quickly. So you understand those ins and outs of the program that you're using. And in some cases, because of that, you may be avoidant to change. And that user may be avoidant to change. And the reason that they would primarily be avoidant to change is because you would be disrupting their current workflow, even if it does provide something that is more seamless and simple. Because anytime that you interrupt someone's routine, it can throw them off balance. So some of the things that you want to ask your internal user is, how do you currently move from point A to point B in the application? From the moment that myself as an end user sits down at a desk and I go to log in to whatever application I'm using, what is my experience from that point of logging in? There are a multitude of things that could happen. Maybe I need a password reset. Maybe I forgot my password. But maybe everything is all gravy and I'm able to log into the application. I log in and now I need to be able to look at, let's say, orders that came in overnight. And then from those orders, I need to, compare those to our stock and look at the various shipments that we have going out. So there are a multitude of things that, the internal user could need to do at this very moment. So when that happens, so how do we help them move from point A to point B? How do we, set up their application, their experience so that, all the pertinent information that they need for that moment is right there. Within that regard, you could say that, all right, this person logs on, and then the first thing that they see is a tab that has new items in it, such as new orders that were received overnight or something of that nature. So that immediately lets them know that, I need to do X, Y, and Z first, because I know that these are here. I don't have to click any other areas within the application to find them. And and that goes to the next point of like asking your end user, like, what information is most important. Having a solid information architecture is necessary for any application that you build. One of the things that I've always noticed in the past is that, being able to model exactly how the website or the web application should be layered on top of one another is always going to be your best bet, because it's going to give you a visual overview of exactly how a user should be able to scan down their screen to find the information that they need very quickly. And within our world, quickness is everything. There was a study done a while back ago about the way we as humans typically will read a website. And I believe it's called the F pattern. And so when we're actually looking at a website, and you'll notice this if you've never thought about it before, and you start going to certain websites, especially newer ones or ones that have been redesigned, is that we actually start to read a lot of information from right to left, then we go down, then we kind of like scan right to left again, and then we go down. And so that's what creates the F pattern. It's very interesting, and a lot of websites actually do use that right now because, they want to hit you at the points in which they know that you'll have focus. And so some other questions that you would want to ask your end user is, what has been the most difficult to complete using the current application? And also, what has been very delightful? Because just because we are in the process of, modernizing and bringing in more interactivity to an application, what's actually been very delightful? What has been very easy and useful that you really want to see in the new application? And so being able to ask those types of questions, they'll definitely give you a full understanding of why you're developing what you're developing, and what you actually need to develop. Um, so the next slide, we're going to look at one of my favorite things to do, and it's about kind of like just a user workflow. So one of the things that's very important, as I said before, is that we're asking these questions because we want to create a powerful, simple user workflow. We want to help our end user get from point A to point B to point C. And so in this, point A, I need to access my system so that I can start the jobs I need to complete. That could easily be me logging in and starting a session. And then from that point, there are other areas in which maybe we need to track the session. Maybe me logging in is also like a timestamp or a clock punch. And then from there, we go to point B. So I'm inside the system and I need to access order details for a recent shipment. So either, let's see, we can have the recent shipments right there, just so they can see them at a glance, or they have to go into an order details view so that then they'll have all the information there. And so you want to be able to start juggling those different ideas and how you could make them work and which one is going to be more seamless, more simple for the end user to actually do. For me personally, I would actually rather log in and see off to the side, recent orders. And that could just be a list that cycles through of recent orders that have happened. And now I can say, okay, so this, and maybe I can click on one of them and open up, a dialogue for additional information. One of my goals is I prefer to keep clicks and touch points to a minimum and only necessary when there is something that needs to absolutely happen or it's the only way. But back to the user workflow. So point C, I've verified the shipment and now I need to contact the customer that it will be late and update my notes. So again, this goes back to how do we make this all a very seamless experience? How do we really wrap these things together with one another so that me as an end user, I don't have to go back and forth between different views. I don't have to necessarily also feel that there's cognitive overload on the page that I'm looking at. And so these are the things that we really think about and talk about when it comes to user experience design. And sometimes that, definitely can take a toll. It's a long, I wouldn't say it's a long process, but it's a process where you want to be very thorough, because the more that you understand your users and the more that you talk to them about what their experience is and you work to build a better experience for them, the easier it is for internal users to get behind changes and modernization projects. And then to external users, it makes it much easier for them to start using your product. One of the things at a previous position that I had where my focus was primarily on user experience design was I want someone to pick up this application and start using it and say, huh, this is so simple, I could have made it myself. And that's the experience that you really want a lot of people to have, is that they can pick it up and they can say, oh yeah, this makes sense. Like I could have put this together myself. This is easy. That's a good experience, but that can also have its negative points. It could be a bad one. But yeah, you want to make sure that you have the best possible experience. And so, here's a few things, like I mentioned before, that you're going to want to do to ensure a seamless experience. So, limiting the number of click and touch points to perform a single operation. You're going to want to make sure that your type, your font is very readable. You're also going to want to stay away from obscure icons or navigation flows, and don't rely just on color to help promote whatever action you may have. because there are situations in which people are colorblind, or they don't necessarily have, the best screens, in which a lot of the colors may actually look more muted than not. So we really want to make sure that we have direct action, such as, cancel is usually going to be in red, but you're also going to want to have the letters, the word cancel, actively there as well. Another key thing that we want to keep in mind is that we don't want to block the UI. So when blocking the UI, basically we're in a situation in which our end user may have clicked on or touched one object and is attempting to retrieve data. And so now the entire user interface is unmovable, it's uncheckable, like you can't do anything. So you want to be in a position in which, for our request, for our point, perhaps you don't necessarily need to do as many synchronous requests as you think. So you would want to experiment with using execute async to help not block the user interface. And moving forward with version 15.1, you're going to want to look at, caching assets that end users will likely need, especially those, that provide your base level of navigation through your application. And if you didn't catch the keynote, within 15.1, one of the things that we're going to be focusing on is providing you with the ability to define your cache storage within the web browser. And what that means is that through the drag and drop interface that many of you may have used on the offline support tab, you'll be able to nominate resources into specific cache stores. And so when your application is launched, then what's called a service worker actually goes through and begins to clone anything that's coming in from the network and placing it into a cache storage. And so now you're in the situation where when your end user needs to view some piece of information, that piece of information may actually just be within the cache storage. And so you don't necessarily have to expend the network costs, because the service worker acts as a proxy that will interrupt the actual request, search the cache, see if it's in there. If it is, then it'll serve it up from the cache to the client. And so things like that actually make it very easy for us to not really block the UI, and it also improves the overall performance of our web applications. So, now we're just going to look at just a couple quick examples of just some ways in which we can have a better user experience for our end users, whether they be internal or external. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about is app bar and menu navigation. So for me, and a lot of people don't always do this, is, when we're looking at progressive web applications, we know that we're able to both have, something for your desktop as well as your mobile applications. And so you're going to want to ensure that there are different changes within your application based on the device size. And so some of that functionality is also going to be enhanced and coming within Visual LANSA very soon through the use of media queries. And that will allow you to kind of, figure out, all right, so if my device is at, the size of a mobile phone, then this is the user interface and experience that should happen. So one thing I wanted to show here is that, with being able to have these desktop applications, these web applications that are installable and usable on the desktop, side navigation actually becomes pretty useful because it gives you a comprehensive look at the navigation and the functions available. And within having side navigation, some of these can be expandable. So if you've ever, some of you that may use Gmail or any other web email application, then on the side, you'll notice that there is a sidebar of, different options such as your inbox, your promotions and social and things of that nature. And some of them are expandable. And so this is something that you could actually do within Visual LANSA. And one of the things that make it very unique is that as this device becomes smaller, then it can move more towards a bottom navigation. Or you can move it towards just having the menu that will slide out. And so it's just really important that we ensure that the icons, the type, the colors, that they remain consistent throughout. The one thing that you wouldn't want to do in these situations is have a completely different experience and user interface from what happens on the desktop environment. And what I mean by that is when I'm resizing, I don't want to see everything completely different. Like the icons that I use in one location, if I'm going to use them on my mobile device, then I want to have the same icons. If the colors are going to be on the desktop, then I want the colors to also be consistent with the mobile device. Because as an end user and being able to have more of this universal experience, you want them to be able to move from your mobile to the desktop at ease with no problem whatsoever. And so actually one interesting point about colors is that for any of you that have ever used Spotify to listen to music, or maybe some other music apps, have you ever noticed the simplicity of the user interface? I believe it has gotten a little bit more complicated over the past year, I think. I haven't been using it for a while. But the last time I really used it, I noticed that Spotify only uses around 3 to 4 brand colors. And as an end user, I know exactly what I need to do, whether I'm on my phone, tablet, or my laptop, in which I'm listening to Spotify in 3 totally different mediums. One is a native mobile app, and then one might be just a web browser, and then there's also the desktop application. And all 3 of those different views have the same functionality. They use the same color scheme, but you always know exactly where you need to go and how to do everything. Your workflow doesn't necessarily change much at all. And we always want to keep that in mind when we're building for these expansive user experiences. Another area that I rarely see people take advantage of, and I think that with the use of progressive web applications and the documentation that we're going to be putting out about that, we'll see more people actually taking advantage of this. And that's snack bar notifications. Snack bar notifications are probably one of the most important and useful web UI controls that exists right now. Because not only do they display relevant information to your end users, but they also provide your end users with responses to whether their behavior was correct or incorrect. So like as you can see here, perhaps I've done something wrong, and the next thing I see is like an error, all in red, with not all capital letters, but exclamation points. So that lets me know that I have done something incorrect. I need to fix this. Or, perhaps I just successfully added a food item to my cart. Having a notification that actually says, hey, you've done this. Congratulations. End users, as part of their experience, whether it be internal or an external user, having feedback towards what action I've taken is very useful and allows you to maintain the attention of either your customers or your internal users. Because, the last thing that you really want to have happen is to click on something, and then you might sit there for 5-10 seconds and you don't know if anything has actually happened. And then all of a sudden, like your whole page changes. That's not an experience that you would want any of your end users to have. You want them to have quick reactions to whatever actions that they have performed. So for example, if I am saving a note to my application and I tap or click the save button, it would be good to know that it actually saved. So either you're going to have a view there that will show a string of text that you have this note, or you have a notification that says note saved, which will allow you to free up the rest of that space for some other potentially important UI and interaction. So, when we think about user experience, we always want to keep it into the context of one, what are the actions, what are the jobs that my end users are attempting to do? And two, how can I design this? Like, how can I build these experiences through a very easy and understandable design? And, one of the things that will help you with that is, sometimes you just have to get away from the computer and you just have to take a piece of paper and a pen and just kind of sketch out. You start from, I'm going to log in, and then you go to, all right, cool, I've pressed the login button. Now I'm here. Now where do I go? Where would this person go? And you just kind of sketch that out very quickly. It doesn't have to be anything, beautiful or elegant, but it will allow you to wrap your head around exactly what the end user is attempting to do and how you can actually design for their success and their efficiency. And a lot of these same principles are principles that we are beginning to take within Visual LANSA when it comes to bringing in new design elements into the IDE. It's going to really be about how do we maintain, a lot of the information architecture that our application developers are very used to, but also make this way more efficient and way more easy to understand, so that it doesn't matter if you are a new Visual LANSA user or an existing Visual LANSA user, that you'll be able to navigate throughout the development environment with complete ease. And so now, if there are any questions, I'm kind of opening it up to some Q&A. But yeah, like this is what we wanted to really talk about when it came to user experience. The next presentation is at 1, and that's going to be on Portalize, so you should definitely not miss that whatsoever. But in regards to user experience, if you have any questions right now, please go ahead and add something into the chat. If not, you can always contact me directly and we can really talk about it. There could be something that might be missing within Visual LANSA that would actually help you in designing adequate user experiences for your internal and external customers. So I would love to hear about any of those. Yep, 1 second, let's see. All right, well, you know what? We're going to just call it a day for right now. And I enjoyed talking to you all about this. And so, yeah, let's keep it going. Like I said, let me know if you have any questions. I love talking about user experience design. And I look forward to really getting any of your input into our future redesigns for the LANSA development environment. All right, thank you all so much and enjoy the rest of low code days.